if you look at exit polls, it's not very promising for Donald Trump, the soon-to-be Republican nominee. At least a good chunk of them in some big states say they would not vote for Trump, or they at least would consider that.
Welcome to The Debrief, where we talk with the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering and where the story's going next. I'm Sarah Bedford, and I'm here with magazine editor David Mark. And David, Nikki Haley has officially suspended her campaign. She's out of the primary. She had been consistently winning, as you pointed out to me earlier this morning, around 30% of Republican voters. What happens now to the third of the primary electorate?
Well, if you look at exit polls, it's not very promising for Donald Trump, the soon-to-be Republican nominee. At least a good chunk of them in some big states say they would not vote for Trump, or they at least would consider that. Whether they would actually vote for Joe Biden as an alternative or just not vote at all, that's an open question. In other words, they might very well go back for Republicans. But even if 10, 15% of these voters decide not to go Trump's way, that could be a big problem. But it's all speculative now, 8 months out.
So Nikki Haley, she obviously didn't perform well overall in the primary, but she did notch victories in Washington, D.C., and Vermont. She does have a few delegates. If there were a scenario where Donald Trump, for whatever reason, was knocked out of the primary before the convention, does her amount of delegates matter, or is it just immaterial at this point?
It's something that would give her somewhat of a lead, but it's not enough to say if, say, there were an opening at the top, that Ron DeSantis or some of these other candidates, Tim Scott, whoever else it might be, they could jump back in the race and say, hey, Nikki Haley doesn't have that many delegates. It's not like she has a hammerlock on. It's not like she's within striking distance of it. So I don't think it really help. I don't think the delegates really help her that much. It's just kind of the moral authority of being the last person, well, in this case, the last woman standing against Donald Trump for the nomination.
So it would be a mess no matter what, basically, if it became a floor fight.
It'd be wide open at that point.
So now that Trump has more or less clinched the GOP nomination, when should we expect him to announce his running mate? When does that strategically make sense?
You know, it's a great question, and there's a lot of different factors. There's been some chatter that the Republican National Committee might actually move up the technical date that he's the nominee, where he accepts the nomination, because that would allow him not to get too much in the weeds, but allow him to accept a big pot of money that he otherwise would not have access to until the general election. That's something that's hurt presidential candidates a lot in the past, so that's something to watch out for. I assume they are vetting these vice presidential hopefuls now, so I don't actually think that might come sooner rather than later.
Well, David, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
You can get more writing from David and the rest of the political team at WashingtonExaminer.com.